My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. For the past 5 years, I'd poured my heart and soul into my job as a marketing specialist at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. I wasn't just an employee. I was a dedicated, hardworking, and passionate member of the team. I thrived on the creative challenges and the fast-paced environment. I loved brainstorming new campaign ideas, analyzing market trends, and crafting compelling content that resonated with our target audience. I routinely put in extra hours, volunteered for new projects, and always went the extra mile to ensure that my work exceeded expectations. I was, by all accounts, a model employee. My colleagues respected me, and my clients appreciated my dedication and expertise. Or at least, that's how it used to be. Everything changed when Mark Thompson arrived. He was brought in as the new head of marketing, a hotshot executive with a reputation for being ruthless and demanding. From the moment he walked in, the atmosphere shifted. The office, once buzzing with collaborative energy, became tense and anxiety-ridden. Mark was a micromanager, constantly breathing down our necks and questioning every decision we made. He had a penchant for belittling employees in public, often making sarcastic remarks and undermining our confidence. He favored a select few, showering them with praise and opportunities while ignoring the rest of us. I quickly fell out of favor. My ideas were dismissed, my contributions were overlooked, and I felt increasingly isolated. He would schedule last-minute meetings that disrupted my workflow, then criticize me for not meeting deadlines. He would change project requirements without notice, then reprimand me for not following instructions. It was a constant barrage of negativity, designed to make me feel incompetent and inadequate. Despite the toxic environment, I tried to remain positive and focused on my work. I believed that if I continued to deliver exceptional results, Mark would eventually recognize my value. But no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. He always found something to criticize, something to nitpick. The stress was taking a toll on my mental and physical health. I found myself dreading going to work each day, and the constant anxiety was affecting my sleep and appetite. I started experiencing panic attacks, and my doctor advised me to reduce my stress levels. I knew I couldn't continue working under these conditions, but I was afraid to quit. I had bills to pay, and finding a new job in this competitive market seemed daunting. So I endured, hoping that somehow things would improve. One Friday afternoon, Mark called me into his office. I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest, bracing myself for another round of criticism. But what he said next shocked me to my core. He informed me that due to performance issues, my employment was being terminated, effective immediately. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that after 5 years of dedicated service, I was being fired for fabricated reasons. I tried to argue my case, pointing out my accomplishments and the positive feedback I had received from clients and colleagues. But Mark was unmoved. He simply handed me a severance package and told me to clear out my desk. As I packed my belongings, tears streamed down my face. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly defeated. I had given this company my all, and this was how they repaid me. Walking out of the office that day, I knew that I couldn't let Mark get away with this. I had to find a way to clear my name and expose his manipulative tactics. The only question was how. Little did Mark know, my termination was only the beginning of his problems. The severance package Mark offered was a slap in the face, a paltry sum that barely covered a month's rent. It was clear that he wanted me gone as quickly and quietly as possible, but I refused to be silenced. I decided to fight back, not just for myself, but for all the other employees who had suffered under Mark's reign of terror. My first step was to consult with an employment lawyer. I explained my situation and presented all the evidence I had gathered, emails, performance reviews, and witness statements from former colleagues. The lawyer listened intently, then informed me that I had a strong case for wrongful termination. Mark's actions clearly constituted a hostile work environment, and his decision to fire me based on fabricated performance issues was illegal. Emboldened by this news, I decided to file a lawsuit against the company, seeking compensation for lost wages, emotional distress, and reputational damage. I knew it would be a long and arduous battle, but I was determined to see justice served. As the lawsuit progressed, I started reaching out to other employees who had been mistreated by Mark. To my surprise, many of them were eager to share their stories. They described instances of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. They spoke of Mark's constant bullying, his unfair treatment, and his blatant disregard for their well-being. I compiled all these accounts into a comprehensive report, which I submitted to the company's Human Resources Department. I demanded that they launch an internal investigation into Mark's conduct and take appropriate disciplinary action. However, the company's response was lukewarm. They claimed to be taking the matter seriously, but they seemed more concerned with protecting Mark than with addressing the underlying issues. I realized that I needed to take my case public. I contacted several media outlets, sharing my story and the stories of other employees. I exposed Mark's manipulative tactics, his toxic leadership style, and the company's complicity in enabling his behavior. The media attention was immediate and intense. The story went viral, sparking outrage and condemnation. Mark was portrayed as a villain, and the company's reputation was severely damaged. As the pressure mounted, the company finally took action. They suspended Mark pending an investigation and hired an external firm to conduct a thorough review of the marketing department. The investigation confirmed everything I had alleged and more. It revealed a pattern of abuse, discrimination, and ethical violations. Mark was ultimately fired, and several other executives were reprimanded for failing to address the issues. I had won my battle against Mark, but the war was far from over. The lawsuit was still pending, and I knew that the company would fight tooth and nail to avoid paying me what I deserved. They offered a settlement, but it was far below what I was seeking. I refused to accept it, determined to see the case through to trial. As the trial date approached, I started feeling the pressure. The company's lawyers were relentless, trying to discredit me and paint me as a disgruntled employee. They dug into my past, searching for anything they could use against me. The stress was overwhelming, and I started questioning whether I had made the right decision. Was it worth putting myself through all this pain and hardship? Just when I was about to give up, something unexpected happened that changed everything. A former colleague, who had initially been hesitant to get involved, came forward with a bombshell revelation that turned the entire case on its head. My former colleague, Emily, had been Mark's administrative assistant for a brief period before she'd abruptly resigned. I knew she hadn't liked him, but I hadn't realized the extent of her knowledge. She contacted me one evening, her voice trembling with nervousness. She told me that she had witnessed Mark engaging in illegal activities, specifically, manipulating sales figures to inflate the company's stock price. She had kept meticulous records of these transactions, including emails, spreadsheets, and handwritten notes. She was terrified of retaliation, but she felt compelled to do the right thing. With Emily's evidence in hand, I approached the Securities and Exchange Commission. They launched an investigation, and it quickly became clear that Mark had indeed been cooking the books. The company's stock price plummeted, and several executives were arrested on fraud charges. Mark was facing serious criminal penalties, including jail time and hefty fines. With the SEC investigation underway, the company's lawyers approached me with a new settlement offer. This time, they were willing to meet my demands, and then some. They offered me a substantial sum of money, a public apology, and a guarantee that I would never be blacklisted from the industry. I accepted the offer, knowing that it was the best possible outcome. I had not only cleared my name and exposed Mark's manipulative tactics, but I had also helped bring down a corrupt corporation. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also made me stronger and more resilient. I had learned the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult and scary. I had also discovered the power of collective action, how ordinary people can come together to fight injustice and hold powerful individuals accountable. After the settlement, I took some time off to heal and recharge. I traveled, spent time with family and friends, and pursued my passions. I also started volunteering for organizations that advocate for workers' rights and fight against corporate greed. I wanted to use my experience to help others who had been victimized by unscrupulous employers. Eventually, I decided to start my own marketing consulting business. I wanted to create a company that was based on ethical principles, where employees were treated with respect and valued for their contributions. I named the company Integrity Marketing, and I made it my mission to provide honest, transparent, and effective marketing services to businesses that shared my values. My business quickly grew, and I soon had a team of talented and dedicated professionals working alongside me. We worked with small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and socially responsible companies, helping them to achieve their goals while making a positive impact on the world. I had turned a negative experience into a positive one, using my pain and suffering to create something meaningful and lasting. Mark's attempt to destroy my career had ultimately backfired, making me stronger, more successful, and more determined than ever. But the story doesn't end there. A few years later, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a marketing conference in New York City. I was honored and excited to share my story with a wider audience. As I prepared my presentation, I couldn't help but wonder if Mark would be there. I hadn't heard from him since the SEC investigation, and I assumed he was lying low, trying to rebuild his life. But I was wrong. On the day of the conference, as I stood backstage waiting to be introduced, I saw him. He was sitting in the front row, staring intently at the stage. My heart skipped a beat. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and resentment. What was he doing here? Was he planning to disrupt my presentation? Was he still trying to sabotage my career? As I walked onto the stage, I made eye contact with him. He didn't smile or wave. He just sat there, his expression unreadable. I took a deep breath and began my presentation, determined not to let him intimidate me. But as I spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, judging me, waiting for me to fail. After the presentation, I was surrounded by people congratulating me and asking questions. I tried to focus on the positive feedback, but my mind was still racing. I knew I couldn't leave the conference without confronting Mark. But what would I say? What would I do? Little did I know, Mark had a surprise of his own in store, one that would reveal the true depths of his depravity. Gathering my courage, I scanned the crowd, finally spotting Mark near the exit. He was talking to someone on his phone, but I could tell he sensed my approach. As I got closer, he ended the call and turned to face me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Sarah," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Fancy seeing you here." I braced myself, unsure of what to expect. "Mark," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "What are you doing here?" He chuckled softly, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Just wanted to see how the mighty have fallen. Or, in your case, risen from the ashes." I refused to let him provoke me. "I'm not interested in playing games, Mark. You ruined my life. What more do you want?" He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "Ruined? Oh, Sarah, I did you a favor. You were stuck in a dead-end job, going nowhere. I simply gave you the push you needed to realize your full potential." I scoffed. "By firing me for fabricated reasons and trying to destroy my reputation." "Collateral damage," he shrugged. "Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet." I couldn't believe his audacity. He truly believed he had done me a favor. "You're delusional, Mark. You're a manipulative, power-hungry sociopath who cares about no one but himself." His expression hardened. "Careful, Sarah. You don't want to make enemies you can't afford." "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Mark. You have no power over me." I turned to walk away, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't be so sure," he hissed. "I still have a few tricks up my sleeve." I yanked my arm away and glared at him. "What are you talking about?" he smirked. "Let's just say I know things about you, Sarah, things you wouldn't want the world to know." My blood ran cold. What could he possibly know? I had been careful to keep my personal life private, especially after the lawsuit. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Oh, I think you do," he said, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Remember that little indiscretion back in college, the one you thought no one knew about?" My heart sank. He knew. He somehow knew about the one mistake I had made in my youth, the one I had tried so hard to bury. "That was a long time ago, Mark. It has nothing to do with anything." "Doesn't it?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Imagine what your clients would think if they found out about your dirty little secret. Imagine what your employees would think. Your reputation would be ruined." I felt like I was going to be sick. He was right. If this information got out, it could destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I want you to drop the lawsuit," he said, his eyes narrowing. "I want you to publicly retract your allegations against me, and I want you to apologize for ruining my career." I stared at him in disbelief. He was asking me to lie, to betray everything I stood for, to protect the man who had tried to destroy me. "I can't do that, Mark," I said, my voice regaining its strength. "I won't let you blackmail me." He shrugged. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, paralyzed with fear and uncertainty. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to fight back, but I was afraid of what he might reveal. I considered going to the authorities, but I didn't have any proof that he was threatening me. It was my word against his, and he was a master manipulator. As I stood there, contemplating my options, I noticed a familiar face approaching me. It was Emily, my former colleague who had provided the evidence that led to Mark's downfall. She looked concerned. "Sarah, are you okay? I saw you talking to Mark. What did he say?" I hesitated for a moment, then decided to confide in her. I told her about Mark's threat, about the secret he knew about my past, and about my fear of what he might do. Emily listened intently, her expression growing more and more serious. When I finished, she took my hand and squeezed it tightly. "Don't let him scare you, Sarah," she said. "He's just trying to manipulate you. You can't let him win." "But what if he reveals my secret?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It could ruin everything." Emily shook her head. "So what? You made a mistake, Sarah." "Everyone makes mistakes. It doesn't define who you are." She paused for a moment, then continued. "Besides, I have a feeling Mark is bluffing. He's probably just trying to scare you. He doesn't actually have any proof." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was wrong. Mark was too confident, too sure of himself. He knew something, and I had a feeling it was more than just a bluff. But as I looked into Emily's eyes, I saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was letting my fear control me. Maybe it was time to fight back, to call Mark's bluff and expose him for the liar and manipulator he truly was. And then, Emily revealed something that made my blood run cold, something that suggested Mark's reach extended far beyond what I could have ever imagined. Emily took a deep breath and said, "Sarah, there's something else you need to know. Something I've been hesitant to tell you because I wasn't sure if I could trust you." I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it, Emily? You can tell me anything." She hesitated for a moment, then continued. "Remember when I said I found some irregularities in the company's financial records, the ones that led to the SEC investigation?" I nodded, remembering the countless hours we had spent poring over documents, uncovering Mark's fraudulent activities. "Well," Emily said, "I also found something else, something that's even more disturbing." She paused again, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "I found evidence that Mark was involved in illegal surveillance activities." I stared at her in disbelief. "Surveillance? What do you mean?" "I found emails and documents that suggest Mark was secretly monitoring the emails, phone calls, and internet activity of several employees, including you and me." My blood ran cold. He had been spying on us all this time. "But why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What was he looking for?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know for sure, but I suspect he was trying to find dirt on anyone who might be a threat to him. He wanted to control everyone and everything." "That's insane," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "How could he get away with something like that?" "He used the company's IT resources and hired a private investigator to do the dirty work. He was very careful to cover his tracks, but I managed to find some incriminating evidence." "Do you have this evidence?" I asked, my voice filled with hope. "Yes," Emily said. "I copied all the relevant files onto a flash drive before I left the company. I've been holding on to it ever since, waiting for the right moment to come forward." "Emily, you're a lifesaver," I said, grabbing her hand and squeezing it tightly. "This could be the key to exposing Mark once and for all." With Emily's evidence in hand, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let Mark blackmail me. I couldn't let him get away with his crimes. I had to fight back, even if it meant risking everything. I decided to go public with Emily's evidence, exposing Mark's illegal surveillance activities to the world. I contacted several media outlets, sharing the information and providing them with copies of the incriminating documents. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The story went viral, sparking outrage and condemnation. Mark was portrayed as a villain, and his reputation was completely destroyed. Law enforcement agencies launched investigations into Mark's surveillance activities, and he was soon facing serious criminal charges. With the walls closing in on him, Mark panicked. He tried to silence me and Emily, issuing threats and attempting to intimidate us. But we refused to be silenced. We knew that we were doing the right thing, and we were determined to see justice served. As the investigations progressed, more and more evidence came to light, revealing the full extent of Mark's depravity. It turned out that he had been involved in a wide range of illegal activities, including embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. He had used the company's resources to enrich himself and silence his critics. He had betrayed his employees, his clients, and his shareholders. He had become a monster, consumed by greed and power. In the end, Mark's crimes caught up with him. He was arrested, charged with multiple felonies, and sentenced to a long prison term. His assets were seized, and his ill-gotten gains were confiscated. He lost everything. As I watched Mark being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure. I had finally gotten my revenge. I had exposed him for the liar and manipulator he truly was, and I had brought him to justice. But my revenge wasn't just about punishing Mark. It was also about protecting others from his abuse. It was about standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult and scary. It was about creating a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. After Mark's downfall, I continued to run my marketing consulting business, helping businesses to achieve their goals while making a positive impact on the world. I also became an advocate for workers' rights, speaking out against corporate greed and advocating for fair treatment for all employees. I had learned a valuable lesson from my experience with Mark. I had learned that even the most powerful and ruthless individuals can be brought down by the courage and determination of ordinary people. I had learned that the truth will always prevail, no matter how hard someone tries to hide it. And I had learned that revenge is a dish best served cold, especially when it is seasoned with justice and compassion. But the story doesn't quite end there. Years later, I received a letter from Mark, postmarked from the prison where he was serving his sentence. Curiosity piqued. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to open it, unsure of what to expect from the man who had once been my tormentor. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, the paper thick and expensive, a stark contrast to the sterile environment I imagined Mark now inhabited. I carefully slid it open, a sense of unease washing over me. The letter was handwritten, the script surprisingly neat and legible. It began with a formal salutation, "Miss Sarah Miller," as if we were mere acquaintances rather than adversaries in a long and bitter battle. As I read on, I was struck by the tone of the letter. It wasn't angry or vengeful, as I had expected. Instead, it was filled with remorse and regret. Mark wrote about his time in prison, describing the isolation and the constant reminders of his past mistakes. He spoke of the shame he felt for the pain he had caused me and the other employees he had mistreated. He admitted that his pursuit of power and wealth had blinded him to the consequences of his actions, and he acknowledged that he had deserved everything that had happened to him. He wrote, "I know that nothing I can say or do will ever make up for the harm I caused you, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry. I have spent a great deal of time reflecting on my life, and I have come to realize that I was wrong to prioritize ambition over integrity. I hope that one day you will be able to forgive me." As I finished reading the letter, tears welled up in my eyes. I had never expected Mark to apologize, let alone express remorse for his actions. I had always imagined him as a heartless and unfeeling monster, incapable of empathy or compassion. But this letter revealed a different side of him, a side that I had never seen before. I didn't know if I could truly forgive him, but I appreciated his apology. It was a small step towards healing the wounds of the past, and it gave me hope that even the most damaged individuals can find redemption. I decided to write back to Mark, acknowledging his apology and expressing my hope that he would continue to reflect on his mistakes and strive to become a better person. I didn't offer him forgiveness, but I did offer him a chance to start anew, to use his experience to help others avoid the same pitfalls he had fallen into. I sealed the letter and sent it off, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. The anger and resentment that I had carried for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of closure and acceptance. I realized that revenge, while satisfying in the short term, is ultimately a destructive force. It can consume you, poisoning your mind and preventing you from moving on with your life. True healing comes not from seeking retribution, but from forgiving those who have wronged you and finding a way to create a better future. I continued to run my marketing consulting business, using my platform to promote ethical and responsible business practices. I became an advocate for workers' rights, fighting against corporate greed and advocating for fair treatment for all employees. I shared my story with others, hoping to inspire them to stand up for what is right and to never let fear or intimidation silence them. And I lived my life with integrity, kindness, and compassion, striving to make a positive impact on the world. In the end, my revenge wasn't just about punishing Mark. It was about transforming myself, becoming a stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate person. It was about creating a legacy of justice, fairness, and equality. And it was about proving that even the most devastating experiences can be turned into opportunities for growth and transformation. As I look back on my journey, I am grateful for the lessons I have learned, the challenges I have overcome, and the person I have become. I am proud of the choices I have made, the battles I have fought, and the victories I have won. And I am confident that the future holds even greater opportunities for me to make a difference in the world. The story of my revenge is not just a story about justice and retribution. It is a story about hope, resilience, and the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity. It is a story about the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult and scary. And it is a story about the transformative power of forgiveness and the ability to create a better future, even in the face of unimaginable pain and suffering. As I close this chapter of my life, I am filled with gratitude, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. I know that the road ahead will not always be easy, but I am confident that I can face any challenge with courage, determination, and an unwavering commitment to justice and equality. And as I embark on this new chapter, I carry with me the lessons I have learned, the memories I have cherished, and the unwavering belief that anything is possible if you have the courage to dream, the determination to persevere, and the faith to believe in yourself. But even with all that behind me, there was one final, unexpected twist to this tale, one that would challenge my newfound peace and force me to confront the lingering shadows of my past. Years after Mark's conviction and my subsequent success, I received an anonymous package at my office. It was a plain brown envelope with no return address. Inside, I found a single photograph. It was a picture of Mark, but not the hardened, defeated Mark I had last seen in court. This Mark was different. He looked content. He was standing in front of a modest house, surrounded by children, a woman by his side, her arm linked through his. They were smiling, genuinely happy. On the back of the photograph, a single sentence was scrawled. "He found his peace, have you?" The blood drained from my face. The implication was clear. Mark had moved on, built a new life, found happiness. And the question haunted me. Had I truly found my peace? Had I let go of the anger and resentment that had fueled my quest for revenge? I had convinced myself that I had, but the photograph stirred something within me, a lingering unease that I couldn't ignore. I spent weeks wrestling with the question, re-examining my motives, my actions, my very identity. Had my pursuit of justice been driven by a genuine desire to right a wrong, or had it been tainted by a thirst for vengeance? Had I become the very thing I had sought to destroy? The answer, I realized, was complex. There was no simple yes or no. My actions had been motivated by a mixture of righteous indignation and a desire for retribution. I had wanted to hold Mark accountable for his crimes, but I had also wanted to make him suffer. And in achieving that goal, I had perhaps lost sight of the bigger picture. I had become so focused on punishing Mark that I had neglected to fully heal myself. The photograph served as a stark reminder that revenge, even when justified, can never truly bring complete closure. It can provide temporary satisfaction, but it cannot erase the pain or undo the damage. The only way to truly move on is to forgive, not just the person who wronged you, but also yourself. And so, I embarked on a new journey, a journey of self-reflection and healing. I sought therapy, meditated, and spent time in nature. I reconnected with friends and family, and I focused on cultivating positive relationships. I learned to let go of the past, to accept the things I could not change, and to focus on creating a better future. It was not an easy process, but it was a necessary one. And slowly, gradually, I began to find my peace. I realized that true happiness comes not from seeking revenge, but from living a life of purpose, integrity, and compassion. I forgave Mark, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to. And in doing so, I freed myself from the chains of the past and opened myself up to a future filled with love, joy, and fulfillment. The photograph of Mark and his family still sits on my desk, a constant reminder of the lessons I have learned. It is a reminder that revenge is a double-edged sword, that forgiveness is the key to healing, and that true peace comes from within. And so, my story comes to an end, not with a bang, but with a whisper. It is a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, redemption. It is a story that I hope will inspire others to stand up for what is right, to forgive those who have wronged them, and to never give up on the pursuit of peace and happiness. The final twist in this tale taught me that true revenge isn't about inflicting pain, but about finding peace within yourself, even when your tormentor has found theirs. And then, just as I thought the dust had settled, I received a cryptic message that hinted at a secret Mark had taken to prison, a secret that could unravel everything I thought I knew about him and the company we both used to work for. It was a digital message, sent through an encrypted channel, a method I hadn't used since the height of my battle against Mark. The message was simple, almost too simple. The Rose Garden remembers. It was signed only with the initial A. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, trying to decipher its meaning. The Rose Garden. The phrase was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. It wasn't a place I had ever visited or heard of in connection with Mark or the company. And who was A? Was it another disgruntled employee, someone who had also been wronged by Mark? Or was it someone closer to Mark, someone who knew his secrets and was now trying to expose them? My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. I knew that Mark had been involved in a lot of shady dealings, but I had always assumed that I had uncovered the full extent of his crimes. Was there something else, something even darker, that I had missed? The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. I couldn't shake the feeling that this message was a warning, a sign that I was about to stumble upon something dangerous. But I also knew that I couldn't ignore it. I had a responsibility to uncover the truth, no matter how painful or disturbing it might be. I started by trying to trace the origin of the message, but the encryption was too strong. I couldn't identify the sender or their location. Next, I turned to my network of contacts, the people who had helped me expose Mark's crimes in the past. I reached out to Emily, my former colleague who had provided the crucial evidence. She was just as puzzled as I was by the message, but she agreed to help me investigate. We started by researching the phrase, the Rose Garden. We scoured the internet, searched through old company records, and even consulted with a few private investigators. But we came up empty-handed. There was no place called the Rose Garden that was connected to Mark or the company. Just when we were about to give up, Emily had a breakthrough. She remembered that Mark had been a member of a secret society in college, a group of wealthy and influential individuals who were known for their exclusive parties and their shady business dealings. The society was called the Order of the Rose, and their meeting place was a secluded garden on the outskirts of town. Could the Rose Garden be a reference to this secret society? It seemed like a long shot, but it was the only lead we had. We decided to investigate further, tracking down former members of the Order of the Rose and trying to learn more about their activities. What we discovered was shocking. The Order of the Rose was not just a social club. It was a criminal organization that was involved in a wide range of illegal activities, including fraud, bribery, and extortion. Mark had been a key member of the organization, using his position at the company to launder money and cover up their crimes. And the other members of the organization were still at large, continuing their illegal activities to this day. The cryptic message, "The Rose Garden remembers," was a warning from someone within the organization, someone who knew about Mark's crimes and wanted to expose them. The sender, A, was likely a former member of the organization who had a change of heart and wanted to make amends for their past actions. But why had they contacted me? Why not go directly to the authorities? I realized that they were probably afraid of retaliation. The members of the Order of the Rose were powerful and ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. By contacting me, they were hoping that I could use my experience and resources to expose their crimes without putting themselves at risk. I knew that I had to act quickly. The members of the Order of the Rose were dangerous, and they would not hesitate to silence anyone who threatened their power. I decided to contact the authorities, but I knew that I couldn't trust them completely. The organization had deep connections, and it was possible that some of the law enforcement officials were corrupt. I needed to find a way to expose their crimes without alerting them to my investigation. I decided to use the media, leaking the information to a trusted journalist who had a reputation for exposing corruption. The journalist agreed to investigate the story, and within days, the scandal was splashed across the headlines. The public was outraged, and the authorities were forced to take action. The members of the Order of the Rose were arrested, and their illegal activities were exposed to the world. Mark's secret was finally out, and the truth was finally revealed. But even as I celebrated this victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The message, "The Rose Garden remembers," still lingered in my mind, a reminder that the past can never be truly buried. And then I received another message from a message that would lead me down a rabbit hole of secrets and lies, a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about Mark and the company. The message simply read, "Look for the blue rose." The phrase, "look for the blue rose," sent a chill down my spine. It was even more cryptic than the first message, and I had no idea what it meant. Was it a metaphor, a code, or was it a literal instruction? I stared at the message for hours, trying to decipher its meaning. I consulted with Emily, and we brainstormed different possibilities. We searched for information about blue roses, but we found nothing that seemed relevant to Mark or the company. We considered the possibility that it was a code, but we couldn't find any pattern or key that would help us break it. Finally, I decided to try a more intuitive approach. I closed my eyes and tried to visualize the phrase, "blue rose." What images came to mind? What feelings did it evoke? As I meditated on the phrase, I started to see a connection between the blue rose and a project that Mark had been working on before he was fired. It was a new product that the company was developing, a cutting-edge technology that had the potential to revolutionize the industry. The project was shrouded in secrecy, and only a select few employees were involved. Mark had been the lead on the project, and he had been extremely protective of it. He had refused to share information with anyone who wasn't directly involved, and he had even threatened to fire anyone who leaked details to the press. The project had been abruptly canceled after Mark was fired, and all the related documents and prototypes had been destroyed. The company claimed that the project was not viable, but I had always suspected that there was more to the story. Could the blue rose be a reference to this secret project? Was it possible that Mark had stolen the technology and was planning to use it for his own purposes? I decided to investigate further, tracking down former employees who had worked on the project and trying to learn more about what they had been developing. What I discovered was shocking. The project was not just a new product. It was a weapon, a powerful technology that could be used to control and manipulate people's minds. Mark had been planning to sell the weapon to the highest bidder, using it to amass even more wealth and power. And the other members of the Order of the Rose were involved in the scheme, providing the resources and connections that Mark needed to succeed. The blue rose was not just a code. It was a symbol of this secret weapon, a symbol that Mark had used to identify the project and its potential. But why had Mark abandoned the project after he was fired? What had happened to the weapon? Had he destroyed it, or was he still planning to use it? I realized that I had to find the answer to these questions before it was too late. The weapon was too dangerous to be left in the wrong hands. I decided to track down Mark, hoping that he could provide me with some answers. It had been years since I had last seen him, and I had no idea where he was living. But I knew that he had always been obsessed with money, so I started by searching for his financial records. What I discovered was a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations. Mark had been hiding his assets, preparing for a life on the run. I traced the accounts to a remote island in the Caribbean, a place known for its lax laws and its safe haven for criminals. I booked a flight to the island, determined to confront Mark and uncover the truth about the blue rose. When I arrived on the island, I was immediately struck by its beauty and its tranquility. But beneath the surface, I sensed a dark undercurrent, a feeling of danger and unease. I tracked Mark to a secluded villa on the outskirts of town. The villa was heavily guarded, with armed men patrolling the perimeter. I knew that I couldn't approach him directly. I needed to find a way to infiltrate the villa and confront him without putting myself at risk. I decided to enlist the help of a local contact, a woman named Isabella who had a reputation for being resourceful and discreet. Isabella agreed to help me, providing me with information about the villa and its security. She also introduced me to a group of activists who were fighting against the island's corrupt government. The activists were willing to help me, providing me with a disguise and a plan to infiltrate the villa. Under the cover of darkness, I approached the villa, disguised as a maintenance worker. I managed to bypass the security guards and enter the villa undetected. I searched the villa, looking for Mark and any evidence of the blue rose weapon. What I found was even more disturbing than I had imagined. Mark had been experimenting on people, using the weapon to control their minds and turn them into his slaves. He had a laboratory set up in the basement of the villa, filled with advanced technology and disturbing medical equipment. And he was planning to expand his operations, using the weapon to control the entire island. I confronted Mark in the laboratory, demanding to know what he was doing. He was surprised to see me, but he quickly regained his composure. He smirked and said, "Sarah, I always knew you were smarter than the others. I knew you would find me eventually." He then revealed the full extent of his plan, explaining how he intended to use the weapon to control the world. I tried to reason with him, but he was too far gone. He was completely consumed by his thirst for power. He activated the weapon, aiming it at me. But before he could fire, Isabella and the activists stormed into the laboratory, disabling the weapon and capturing Mark. The authorities were alerted, and Mark was arrested and taken into custody. The victims of his experiments were freed, and the island was liberated from his control. The Blue Rose weapon was destroyed, and its secrets were buried forever. But even as I celebrated this victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was not over. Mark had been defeated, but the forces of evil were still at large. And then I received a final message from A message that would reveal the true mastermind behind the Blue Rose weapon, a message that would lead me to the very heart of the conspiracy. The message read simply, "Follow the money, Sarah. It always leads back to the source. Follow the money." The advice echoed in my mind, a stark and simple directive that cut through the fog of deception and intrigue that had surrounded me for so long. I had focused so intently on Mark, on his twisted ambitions and his cruel experiments, that I had failed to see the bigger picture. Who had funded him? Who had provided the resources and the connections that had allowed him to develop the Blue Rose weapon? The answer, I knew, lay in the money trail. I returned to Austin, determined to unravel the financial web that had supported Mark's nefarious activities. I enlisted the help of a forensic accountant, a brilliant and meticulous woman named Olivia who had a knack for finding hidden assets and uncovering fraud. Olivia and I spent weeks poring over financial records, tracing the flow of money from offshore accounts to shell corporations and back again. The trail was complex and convoluted, but we slowly began to piece together the puzzle. We discovered that Mark had been receiving funding from a variety of sources, including wealthy individuals, corrupt corporations, and even some government agencies. But one name kept popping up, a name that sent a chill down my spine: Richard Harding. Richard Harding was a billionaire businessman, a powerful and influential figure who had a reputation for being ruthless and amoral. He was the CEO of a multinational corporation that was involved in a wide range of industries, including technology, pharmaceuticals, and defense. He was also a known philanthropist, donating millions of dollars to charitable causes and supporting various political campaigns. On the surface, Richard Harding seemed like a pillar of the community, but beneath the veneer of respectability, he was a master manipulator, a puppeteer who controlled the strings of power. He had a long history of unethical and illegal behavior, including insider trading, tax evasion, and bribery. He was also rumored to be involved in organized crime, using his wealth and influence to protect his interests and silence his enemies. Could Richard Harding be the mastermind behind the Blue Rose weapon? Was it possible that he had been using Mark as a pawn in a larger game? The evidence seemed to suggest that he was. We discovered that Harding had been secretly funding Mark's research for years, providing him with the resources and the expertise he needed to develop the weapon. He had also been using his influence to protect Mark from scrutiny, shielding him from law enforcement and the media. But why? What was Harding's motive? What did he hope to gain from the Blue Rose weapon? The answer, we realized, was control. Harding wanted to use the weapon to control the minds of the masses, to manipulate their thoughts and emotions, and to turn them into obedient puppets. He believed that he could create a perfect society, a world where everyone was happy and productive, but only if he was in charge. He was a megalomaniac, a delusional tyrant who believed that he was doing the world a favor by imposing his will upon it. I knew that I had to stop him before it was too late. Harding was too powerful to be taken down by ordinary means. I needed to find a way to expose his crimes to the world, to strip away his veneer of respectability, and reveal him for the monster he truly was. I decided to use the media again, leaking the information to a team of investigative journalists who had a proven track record of exposing corruption. The journalists agreed to investigate the story, and they quickly uncovered a wealth of evidence that confirmed our suspicions. They discovered that Harding had been involved in a wide range of illegal activities, including fraud, bribery, and even murder. They also uncovered evidence that linked him to the Blue Rose weapon, proving that he was the mastermind behind the scheme. The journalists published their findings in a series of explosive articles that sent shockwaves around the world. The public was outraged, and Harding's reputation was shattered. He was forced to resign from his position as CEO, and he was stripped of his philanthropic awards. Law enforcement agencies launched investigations into his activities, and he was soon facing a mountain of criminal charges. With the walls closing in on him, Harding went into hiding, attempting to evade arrest. But I was determined to bring him to justice. I used my network of contacts to track him down, following his trail from country to country. Finally, I cornered him in a remote mountain hideaway in Switzerland. Harding was surrounded by bodyguards, but I was not afraid. I confronted him, demanding that he surrender and face the consequences of his actions. He refused, claiming that he was innocent and that he was being framed by his enemies. He then ordered his bodyguards to attack me, but I was prepared. I had been training for this moment, honing my skills in self-defense and martial arts. I fought off the bodyguards one by one until only Harding remained. He lunged at me, wielding a knife. I dodged his attack and disarmed him, pinning him to the ground. I looked into his eyes, seeing the fear and desperation that had driven him to commit such horrific acts. I could have killed him, but I chose not to. I realized that revenge would not bring me peace. The only way to truly defeat Harding was to bring him to justice, to let the law take its course. I handed him over to the authorities, knowing that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. With Harding behind bars, the world was a safer place. The Blue Rose weapon was no longer a threat, and the forces of evil had been vanquished. But even as I celebrated this victory, I knew that the fight was not over. There would always be individuals like Harding, driven by greed and power, who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. It was up to me, and to all of us, to remain vigilant, to stand up for what is right, and to never let evil triumph. My journey had come to an end, but my mission had just begun. And then, as if to underscore that very point, a new message arrived, not encrypted, not anonymous, but a simple postcard with a picture of a white rose, and the words, "The garden never truly sleeps," leaving me to wonder if I had truly won, or merely survived to face a new, unseen threat.